In this presentation, I'm going to introduce to you how to write Chapter 3, or the methodology for quantitative studies. This is unique because each type of methodology, whether it be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, has the separate sections that need to be included. And since the majority are working on quantitative studies that involve an instrument or survey, I really want to focus this lesson on writing Chapter 3 for such a methodology. By the time that we're done with our lesson, you'll be able to identify the writing format that's appropriate for Chapter 3. We're going to discuss how to write an objective tone. We're going to recall the importance of replication when writing Chapter 3, and then identify the sections for writing Chapter 3. This chapter is probably going to be the most enjoyable to write because it's where you're actually describing your research design and the procedures that you will implement in your study. And in doing so, you are going to apply what you have learned from doing the background research for your literature review, looking at the past studies and the theoretical framework or conceptual framework, and then how that actually applies to your specific study. Chapter 3 is very important because your chairperson or your committee members will review this chapter carefully to decide if your research design is appropriate for your research problem and the objectives, questions, and/or hypotheses you have determined, and identify areas that could be improved prior to data collection. Chapter 3 is a critical component of your master's thesis proposal or your master's thesis. And in this chapter, you're really going to describe in detail how you're going to conduct your research study. And we're going to talk about all of the different components. But as you write for this chapter, I want you to write in either future tense or present tense. And whatever tense you used for Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, you need to stick with for Chapter 3. Chapter 2 is a heavily past tense just because you're writing about past research that's already been done. But when it comes down to Chapter 1, what you want to do, what is your problem, what is your significance of that problem, what are the definitions, what is the background and the setting, and what are some of the details about your topic that you're introducing to your readers, like the basic assumptions and the delimitations and the limitations for your research. You can write that in either future tense or present tense. I would need you to keep that same tense for Chapter 3. I also want you to think about how to remain objective or unbiased in your writing. You need to make sure that any information you provide is backed up thoroughly from past literature, the methodology, the data analysis procedures, the data collection procedures. Never make any sweeping judgments or generalizations for your study, and you have to be exceptionally detail-oriented when it comes to writing Chapter 3 because you want to make sure your study is replicable. And this is interesting because what that means is that your study can be replicated by other researchers. We want to make sure that you write in such a way that the detail given for who is your sample, who is your population, what instrument are you using, what data collection process are you doing, what data analysis procedures are you following, that someone else could actually reproduce those same procedures looking at their research problem. And we want to explain how and why you will do your research and really just provide accurate, detailed descriptions of what it is you're going to do for this study. Think of it as transparency. If you're not transparent about your ideas, your readers will not understand what you're doing, and then they will not perhaps understand your research problem and how you went about collecting the data and why you did what you did if you don't explain to them why survey methodology was the most appropriate with this particular population. And from that population, you picked a particular sample, and this is the reasons why you did that. You're really just creating almost like a roadmap or ingredients in a recipe for someone else to be able to do your study and learn perhaps something similar from the experience that they'll do. But to help you write chapter 3, I really want you to start by creating an outline. It's nice to know what possible headings you might need for a quantitative study. And so these are just the ones I want to focus on with you. I always like to set up chapter 3 with an introduction, followed by maybe some settings or background or context to the study, if that's something that your committee members desire. Your research questions, your objectives, your hypotheses that you've mentioned in chapter 1, talk about your research design, your participants, the population, your intervention, your instrumentation, the procedures for data collection, your data analysis procedures, as well as a short summary at the conclusion of the chapter. So what I'm going to do is walk through each one of these possible headings so that you'll know what the expectations are. And I'm going to share with you a master's thesis proposal that was defended in our department, but it's always possible to improve on it. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that.